oh, wow, I can see a baby in her hands. She's going to have a little baby. And I'd say to Mum, your friend's pregnant. Oh, no, she's not. I said, well, she is, because I can see her holding a little baby girl with red hair and freckles. And Mum dismissed the whole thing. Well, of course, inevitably, through the course of time, it would happen, it would come to pass. And Mum would come to me a little confused and say, who told you this? How did you know this?
Welcome, I'm Peter Williams, and for the past 10 years, I've been connecting with thousands of people from the stage and online to help them discover the importance of spiritual and energetic practices so they can thrive with confidence, clarity, and purpose. It is time to awaken your connection, align with your soul, and achieve your own inner power right here on the Inner Power Podcast. We are so excited to be here. Just to fill you in, we are two guys who are full-time psychics and mediums, and we're here to sit down to break down some of the complexities and misconceptions around spirituality and what it's like living between two worlds. It's so exciting because I'm joined here by an awesome mate of mine, David Laws. He reads flowers for a living, and of course, I am Pete, and I speak to dead people for a living. So as you can tell, we have a unique point of view to walk you through this and provide insights and some anecdotes about this world and the next. So hang on to your hat as we take you on this journey, and to help us start that journey, mate, David, welcome. How you doing, mate?
Hey, good, thanks, Pete. Thanks for the intro. How exciting is this for us today?
I know, right? We talk about things and universe and really live in this life, and I suppose we both do it, don't we?
We do, mate. We do. And to clarify something very important, we are psychic and not psycho. So
very much so.
A lot of people think, are psychic? Are you psycho? Well, I used to think I was, but you know what? It's really not quite that way. In fact, the worlds that you and I live in, Pete, are two very, very exciting worlds. And this is what we're going to bring to our beautiful listening audience today.
Yes, and I suppose the thing is, it's a great place to lead into because you read flowers for a living. I speak to dead people for a living. And I don't mean to be crude, but that's just putting it in the most simplified terms we can.
Correct.
But the truth is, we didn't start off like this, did we?
No.
You know?
See, that's the thing, Pete, because a lot of people don't understand that when you are gifted with a gift or ability or a skill of some sort, you are born with that. No one wakes up in the morning and goes, what will I do today? I know, I think I'll be a psychic, or I think I'll be a medium. That's what I'd like to do. It's a gift that chooses you. You know, it comes to you. You were born with that. And through the course of your life, you will, you know, if you align yourself with that gift and talent, you'll expand on it. And inevitably, it may even become your destiny, as it has done with you and I.
And that's a perfect point, because when we look at this, I know that no guidance counsellor was directing me in the direction of going out there and speaking to hundreds of people and connecting with their loved ones. But, you know, when we look at this, and I think that's the thing, through our journey, we've noticed that there have been cues, there have been hints. And, you know, through our journeys and, you know, the conversations that we've had that thing of people asking about, you know, Pete or Dave, how do you know that's the universe, or how do you know that's the right thing to do? And that's what we're going to get into here today. We're going to help you and break down some of those wonderful universal breadcrumbs. And they are so easily missed sometimes, and we're going to walk you through it. And the best way to do that is we're going to tell you how we got to where we are today.
Yes.
So, mate, let's rewind. I know yours cassette might go a little bit further back. A little bit further by.
You use the word cassette. Now, that's my language, mate. That's, you know, I'm so 1970s.
And you're still driving the Cadillac, mate.
I am. Yes, both my cars are more than 40 years old. So,
but they're in mint condition, which is awesome. But let's go back and just describe to our listeners, you know, how did this really start for you? How did this kick off? Because it is. It's like, even though you said we're born with it.
Yeah, that's right.
How does it bubble up? How does it come to the forefront?
Do you know what, Pete? As you would understand, mate, it's something that's ever so subtle. It's very subtle, and it's not something that hits you with a sledgehammer and you don't suddenly see, you know, dead people walking around. Well, I certainly didn't.
Neither did I, mate.
No, that's right. For me, it was more or less, I refer to it as a knowing. And I used to feel things about people and know things about people. And when I was quite young, I'd mention things to mum and dad and they'd sort of brush it off and go, oh, whatever. But I just thought, why do I know this about this person? Or I would meet one of my mother's friends and I'm thinking, oh, wow, I can see a baby in her hands. She's going to have a little baby. And I'd say to Mum, your friend's pregnant. Oh, no, she's not. I said, well, she is, because she's I can see her holding a little baby girl with red hair and freckles. And Mum dismissed the whole thing. Well, of course, inevitably, through the course of time, it would happen, it would come to pass. And Mum would come to me a little confused and say, who told you this? How did you know this? Like, what, how, David, I can't understand where you're getting this information from. And back then as a child, you don't know either, because it's information, it's knowledge that comes into your being. It's in your head. It's not like a person or a man or a lady was whispering to me, or I wasn't getting a direct line from God. It was just, I just call it the knowing. I just used to feel this knowing, and it's a feeling of knowledge. It's like, oh, suddenly I know what to say when I'm using those senses. And I must add, Pete, that in those early days, it wasn't something that was prolific, and it wasn't something that was every day. It was very random and very, just little, as you said before, Pete, breadcrumbs, little sprinklings of things every now and again. Yeah. I'm back in the 70s, mate, growing up as a kid, I didn't even know what the word psychic meant. I didn't know what a spiritualist was. I didn't know anything about spirit or the way that we do now, because remember, back in the late 60s, 70s.
I can't remember, mate.
No, you weren't here. You weren't here. Let me tell you, it was a great time, wasn't it? It was a great time. If you were lucky enough to remember it. The drugs were good back then too. So,
they're the psychedelics.
That's right there. Boom. I love it. So, as fate led me down the path. I mean, I left school at 3 minutes past 15, and I really didn't gel all that well with school. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with school. Not many kids do. But I fell into the work of, public work through retail and what have you, and had, inverted commas, normal jobs and had a normal life. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and it was just very normal until I reached my early 20s. And I had this yearning, this feeling. I thought, I've got to do something with this feeling. And why do I know all this information? And as you can appreciate, back in the early 80s, there was no such thing as the internet. It didn't exist. Everything was books. And if you were lucky enough to meet somebody who could guide you to a book or to a meeting or to a group who could assist you and help you.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because, I was just fortunate enough, so let's fast forward that cassette, and we're starting to get to CDs now. Yeah. But the whole point is, like, I know that feeling, like, of going through that. I think you might have been a little bit luckier than I was, because with your mum going, where did that come from? Yeah. I think my parents were just kind of worried. It's like, is he going to turn goth? Where's he going to go with this? We don't know. So they just left me to my own devices. Correct. But it's interesting too, you had no internet. I did, my coming into this was of the age of Netscape Navigator. As the browser of choice, and Alta Vista was the search engine. And you kind of know where you are in the timeline of things in the internet age when you sign up for an email address and you only have to use 5 letters, no dashes, no special, no caps lock. So it was like very back in the day. So I was a little bit more fortunate. I could go looking. But you had this difference. It's like you had this knowing, and it was before the internet. But when we look at this, like, you're saying here in your 20s or early 20s, it's like, you knew something was coming. Mm. But, can you recall, like, were there any other, like, breadcrumbs that the universe provided to you before that moment, before you really kind of got into it?
Well, really, for me, one of the major breadcrumbs that came to me was a gift, and it was a gift of a book. I call it my early Bible, and it was a book called Reaching for the Other Side, and it was authored by Dawn and Roland Hill, a husband and wife team. Now, that was gifted to me in 1979 when I was 19 years of age. And I can remember devouring that book thinking, oh, my God, this is like manna from heaven, because it was the first time I'd ever read a book that pertained to my experiences and the thoughts and feelings that I had. And, here are 2 people who understand me and I understand them, because it was virtually gifted to me from the world that I knew existed, but nobody else in my world knew or understood, even though I didn't know and understand it, but they were speaking my language.
So did you ask for this book?
No, it was gifted to me. Somebody just gifted it to me. It was a lady that I worked with at David Jones. I'll never forget. And one day I was chatting randomly about my thoughts and my spiritual feelings and inklings. Yeah. And one day she just turned up. She said, you might find this book interesting. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, what's this? Within 3 pages, I was hooked. And that book became my Bible. And I just hung on every word of that book. And amazingly, Dawn and Roland Hill only lived a few suburbs from where I lived in Sydney at the time, so they were local as well, which really intrigued me. It was just fantastic.
Well, see, it's interesting because you're kind of, I suppose, just putting it out there. You're kind of exploring. And I think the big thing too is expressing
That's right.
this side of, yourself.
Yeah.
Like I always said, like, you had to talk about it and receive the book. I was searching for things online, but I know I was sending emails to people trying to help me. Like the wind is talking. I know it sounds weird, and I look back and think I might have been psycho, but but I now understand what was kind of happening. But I was working through these things. Now, when you look at the journey and we look at this moment, it's like I look at that and going, you receiving the book, you had to read it. Mm-hmm. You had to say yes to it.
Yes.
You had to accept it.
Correct.
And the same thing, as much as I was trying to reach out and have people explain things to me, but I still ended up having to read.
Yes.
I still had to explore, and I still had to do exercises.
Correct.
And I believe it's correct when you finished reading this, it was kind of leading you into some palm readings.
Correct. That was so funny because I thought, what do I do? How do I tune into this person? And back in those early days, I'd say to somebody, can I just have your hand, please? And they'd hand over their hand, the hand over their hand. And I'm not a palmist. I've never been trained in palmistry, and I'm not a palmist by any means. But I used to just hold that person's hand, and I would elicit my guidance from the universe that way. And somehow, once I tuned into that person's energy and looked at their little hands or their lines or their patterns, somehow it's translated into some type of a message. And to be honest, Pete, in those days, it was a bit of fun, a little bit of larky, and a little bit of, it's a bit of jovial stuff, a bit of laughter. Oh, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen. And then over the course of time, people would come back to me saying, do you remember that palm reading you did at the barbecue that time, or down at the drinks we had at Anne's place that night, or that morning tea at work? And I'd go, yeah, well, it's all come true. It's all come to pass. And
Isn't it amazing how that happens?
Really? I know. It's like, geez, that was a good guess.
Yeah. But I could so relate to that because, like, I was going through it, and I remember I found this wonderful article, and I know because the website's still around, and it's crystallinks.com, and oh my God, the lady there, she's got a plethora of information. Yeah. And I don't know how, but obviously I was led to the right space, and I got into meditation very quickly, and there was an exercise of automatic writing. And, me being me, like, same thing. Oh, this is a bit of fun. And really, it was a hobby, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it was just my own personal interest, and I wanted to explore it. And I, in that first night, I sat down at 2 a.m. And as you do when you're 14, and, you sit there and you go, sure, I'm going to start talking to the invisibles, And all of a sudden you sit there and you relax, because some people don't know what automatic writing is. And so you just relax, you get yourself into a nice meditative state, and you've got pen and paper in your hand, and you just kind of relax. And all of a sudden you just really let go. And in that, then all of a sudden you're channeling the information through, and your hand starts to move by itself.
Correct.
And look, I won't lie. As soon as it did, I absolutely shit myself.
Yeah.
The pen went one way, the book went the other way. I go, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I remember going, I need to tell someone. It was so exciting, And I thought, I've got to tell mum and dad. They're asleep. Not a good idea. So I had to wait till the next morning. But it led me from there, from that moment, from that connection, it led me in. So you had your, palmistry and palm reading. I lent myself to tarot for some reason. Yeah. But again, like, I went off and taught myself. And same thing, all of a sudden I was just practicing, and then I had friends of friends and friends of friends, and then go, hey, Pete, you know what? It's like, same thing, lunch break room, whatever. You did that card reading for me?
Yeah.
That stuff started to happen. And you're kind of going, okay, well, that's good. I don't know what else to do with it. I just said what I said. So,
exactly.
But it's interesting. It's those moments of, I think we need to say yes.
Yes.
And, when you sum it up, Dave, with that first kind of moment, would you call that subtle? Or would you say that universe is really hammering you to do this?
They were never hammering me to do this. It was ever so subtle. And as I said, it was very light-hearted. It was fun. It was a bit of a fun thing to do. And by the stage of me reaching my sort of early mid-20s, Mum and Dad had, quite warmed to the idea that their son had this gift, skill and ability to be able to connect to the universe or whatever it was and bring through some messages. And Mum used to say, oh, look, we're having a barbecue on the weekend. We've got a few friends over. Could you do a little reading just for my girlfriends? I say, yes, Mum, we can do that. And it was always a little bit of fun, a whine and a giggle. We used to call it whine, giggle and laughter. And David will do some readings for us. And it was always quite light-hearted fun. Never once in those times did I ever realise that it would be leading me to my destiny.
Oh,
little did I
absolutely.
realize that those little fun parties and those little fun hand readings and those little fun barbecues, they were a part of my spiritual apprenticeship that led me the little breadcrumbs, one little crumb at a time, which then came to a few more crumbs and then half a slice of bread, then a slice, then a loaf. It leads you onto this path to where I am today and to where you are today, Pete. And I think very, very few people would know from a very young age that the work that you are and I are involved in professionally in a full-time way now is something that they are aware of from a very young age. In fact, I think, of the big names in the world that I have heard of and that I know they're in our work, none of them started out as a child saying, I'm going to be a full-time professional psychic or a medium as a living. It's something that develops. We develop this. Yes. And sometimes, certainly in my case, it was a series of circumstances that occurred to me that almost forced me to look at this side of my life. It's almost like spirit took they didn't take things away, but I went through a series of experiences where I lost lots and lots of things, and it revealed my truth. Yep. And my truth was this work. And I almost laughed. I said, you can't expect me to be doing this as a full-time thing. But of course now, as we sit here today, this is my 13th year as a professional psychic. And if somebody had literally done a reading for me or looked into their crystal ball 13, 14 years ago and told me what my destiny was, I would have laughed at them.
Yeah.
But guess what? Fate has its way of bringing its
and it's
way
so
to you.
Interesting because I look at it now, same thing like you said, universe and spirit, kind of like they don't take away things, but they will help move you and nudge you into the right direction. And I know that for a fact because I'm absolutely so grateful because I'm sitting here with you talking about this and trying to help people to understand those universal movements and breadcrumbs. As it is, like we're getting so close, like it's literally almost to the minute of the 10-year anniversary of the Fukushima earthquake, which I was there for. That was the moment that my life changed. And I literally do tell people, universe and spirit literally moved the earth and water to get me back here and put me on this path. And you just kind of go, wow. But I still had to say yes.
That's right.
I still had to say yes to it. It's interesting. But, let's go back into it because I know for a fact that when I was going through this and, I was the hobby thing, you're connecting up, doing a few fun readings here and there. And then all of a sudden it's like you just kind of get to a point where you're like, I want more. Yeah. It's also the thirst becomes, insatiable. It's like, I really just want it. Where do I go? Because there's only so much you can kind of research and it's nice. Universe will provide gifts like we've talked about when they do. And I think at the time I was really looking for a mentor. Mm-hmm. And I remember specifically that I had a reading about 17 and it was one of my first ever that I went for. And his name was Dance Hart. He was a nice guy, and I just remember he nailed on the head. He goes, oh, look here, young man, you're looking for this old style master and apprenticeship style thing, aren't you? I'm like, yes. And he says, mate, this doesn't happen anymore. He goes, you're going to have to, you take bits and pieces here, take bits and pieces there. Now that was an interesting turning point for me because I really did want a mentor. And I have to admit, it kind of deflated me. I was a bit disappointed. I walked away, not exactly, tooting the horn, go, oh, that was an awesome reading, because I was a bit disappointed. But it was a truth I needed to hear. And at that moment, I let go. And I was like, okay, well, I just have to accept that. I'm going to have to do some of the work. But then lo and behold, I went to a reading and I took my friend for her birthday for a reading. And I took her down to the little crystal shop, and behind there, little old lady comes out. My friend went first because it's her birthday. Anyway, she comes out bawling her eyes out. I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, what have I done here? I'm like, this is her bloody birthday. And it's like she's crying, like literally tears. The floodgates have opened. And this little old lady comes out. She goes, it's okay, dear. She just needs to have a good cry. She'll be right. It's your turn's next, but just give me a minute. I'm just going to go for a walk around the block. And I remember that after that, I had my reading. And I remember she pulled out this one card of the Osho Zen deck. And she goes, see that card? And it's a card of this big grey bearded man with a big white light above his head. She goes, that's you. I'm like, it meant nothing to me. But the whole point is that right there in that moment, once I had let go of this fact of what I was looking for, she said, you know what? I think you'd really benefit if you come along on every Tuesday night. We have this gathering and you can come along, and it's, as long as the fairy lights are on, you can come in.
Wow.
And now I know from talking to you, you had a very similar situation, didn't you?
I certainly did. Almost verbatim. Because my gathering was every Tuesday night as well.
How unbelievable. Tuesday night.
I know,
And
Tuesday
my
night.
mentor did say, it's Tuesday night because we get to choose.
Yeah.
And I was like, I always like that. It's always stuck with me, that one.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Chooseday. Tuesday. I love that. But no, it was a very, very similar thing with me. And I was very fortunate to meet my great mentor teacher, who sadly has now long since passed. But back in those days, I can remember thinking, who's my guide? Who's my teacher? Like, who can help me on this journey? Who can help me understand, what I'm all about and who I'm all about and what's this gift and how do I corral it into something and utilize it in a way that's going to benefit me and other people? I mean, I had visions of somebody like Dumbledore out of Harry Potter turning up like a wise wizard.
That was my card, mate.
That's right. It sounded like your card.
did,
And it had the scrolls of wisdom and had all this knowledge. And I was expecting or hoping somebody like Dumbledore would turn up to take me under his wing and guide me. But of course, my guide did turn up, and she was the most nondescript person. God love her. Her name was Denise. Denise back then was one of Sydney's finest trance mediums, and I had no idea who this lady was, but she'd heard about this young guy who was doing these funny little hand readings. So she booked in to come and see me for a reading, half to get a reading and half to check me out to see, she was quite keen to hear what I was all about. She'd heard reports about this young guy doing these readings. So she came along one Thursday night, and I'll never forget, Pete, she came to my front door, and little did I realise that when I answered the door that night, there stood my great mentor and teacher who would have a major, major part. She would play a major part in my destiny. And when I opened the door, there she stood. And Denise was a buxom lady, had her hair pulled back in a bun, and she was the quintessential Ockerossie lady from the western suburbs of Sydney, out where I used to live at that time, out near Campbelltown in New South Wales. Denise had three loves in life. She loved spirituality, Winfield blue cigarettes and Tic Tacs, and that's what she lived on. And she always had a Winnie Blue out the corner of her mouth. And when I answered the door, she says, "Oh, hello, love. Hi, I'm here to see you for the reading." And I said, "Oh, well, hang on, well, just come on in." She said, "Oh, hang on, love." And she put the cigarette out. I thought, my God. So I ushered her inside to my little reading room, and I did the little reading for her, the little hand reading. And she sat there with a big grin on her face. And I said, "So that's it. Do you have any questions?" She said, "No, love, I don't, but I got one for you." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" She said, "Who's that bloke standing beside you?" I went, "What?" And I turned to the side. I said, "I don't know. I can't see anyone." She said, "Well, love, he's the one giving you all your messages." And I went, "Oh, wow. Who are you?" "Oh, love, I forgot to tell you, I'm a medium as well." I went, "Oh, wow, a medium. Oh, my God, I don't think I've ever met a medium before." So she said, "Yeah, love, that's what I do." And she said, "I'm telling you," she said, "he's giving you all that reading that you gave me." That's what it was. And I said, "Wow." And then she told me the most extraordinary thing, Pete. She said, "Do you know, he's telling me to tell you that one day you will read flowers for thousands and thousands of people."
Now, how did that go down? Like,
I just laughed because
every time I'm like, how does that compute in someone's head? Like, you're going to read flowers for a living.
I just laughed. I said, "That is so cool. Who is your drug dealer?" Wow, that's just cool. She said, "Love, I'm telling you." I said, "Flower reading? Plain or self-raising, She said, "No, love, the flowers are growing in the garden." And I said, "What?" And then this is hilarious. She said, "Look, love, I've got more to tell you." But she said, do you mind if we go out to your veranda? I want to have a cigarette and I've got more to tell you." I said, "Oh, sure." So we went out to the veranda. She lit up a Winnie Blue and she stood there. This is so funny. And she said, she's blowing the cigarette, going, and she said, "You know what, love?" She said, "I reckon you should come to my house next Tuesday night." And I said, "And why is that?" She's sitting there puffing away. This woman smoked like a bushfire in a hot westerly, and she smoked. And she's sitting there and she just said, "Well, I run a healing group." Healing group, and she's munching on these Winnie Blues. And she said, "I run a healing group," and she said, "We do readings and we do all sorts of healing." And I thought, "Oh, okay, this is cool." And I said, "All right, well, look, I'll pop over." And I went over the following Tuesday night. There was groups of people in the lounge room and all had little bags of flowers. And back in those halcyon days of the 80s, Pete, every second person used to smoke. And there was a room full of chain smokers. So when I walked into the room, I could barely see anyone. So I didn't know whether they were real people or ghosts. I could see silhouettes. It's like, "Oh, hello, there is someone there. Oh, hello, hi." I was just sort of puffing the smoke away. "Oh, there is someone there. Hello. Oh, g'day, mate. Yeah, have a seat." I thought, bloody hell. Then Denise came out and she said, "Well, love," she said, "don't worry, love." She said, "The healing room's out the back and there's no smoking out there. We just have a smoke before we go out." I thought, this is so funny. And that's where the flower reading started for me. And I must admit, the very first time I ever picked up a flower out of the bag, I said, "What do I have to do with this?" She said, "Love, you pull the flower out of the paper bag, hold it up to your third eye, close your eyes, and it'll give you messages. It'll talk to you." And I thought, oh, wow, this is cool. So, of course, I pulled the flower out of the bag, held it up to my third eye, and the flower never said a bloody word. It's just not telling me anything. And she's sitting there puffing away the cigarette. And she said, it's all right, love, you're not focusing. I said, well, I am focusing. She said, that's all right, love. And at the end of the night, I said, well, look, thank you. It was awfully nice of you to invite me. I really want to thank you for inviting me along. And she said, love, I'll see you next week. I said, oh, do you want me to come back? Love, I'm going to be your teacher. Now, do you know what? All jokes aside, Pete, her house became my church for the next 2.5 years. I never missed a Tuesday night. To me, it was my church. And the people that were there were so beautiful, so fantastic, and I just learned so much. And she was very old school and taught a lot of the old school traditional spiritual ways. Many aspects of those teachings that I still implement and practice and teach in my own workshops to this day. So extraordinary experience.
And mate, it's like I can totally relate to that because it was the Tuesday nights. Couldn't wait for Tuesday to roll around, and I love the way you describe that in terms it becomes your church because you finally get to feed that part of yourself, and you're in amongst people who obviously all connect with you, and it's like and I look at that, but it's amazing, isn't it, when we really boil it down and I just love the way our stories are just almost parallel, but just a couple of decades apart.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
Tuesday nights, my mentor, Ellie, she's an awesome soul. I've got the privilege of still being able to connect with her today. But same thing, yep, she was loving her ciggies too. She'd be out there having a puff.
I think your cue was the fact that if the fairy lights are on, it's on. I think if the windows are open, the smoke's coming out. It was on.
You actually had smoke signals,
We actually had smoke signals. That's right. And the funny thing was, her Indian guide, his name was Longfeather. So his name was Longfeather, and she had a long draw. Long draw on the ciggy.
But when you look at it though,
excuse me,
in those initial early days, we had to. It's almost like we had to say yes, and we had to kind of go. We want to know more. Yeah, we had to do the digging. And, because you were at a point there, you were looking for that mentor too, weren't you?
Correct.
Yeah. But did it come straight away?
No, it didn't come straight away.
So between then and meeting Denise, how long between receiving
probably,
the book?
Well, mate, I met Denise when I was around 26 years of age.
So that's a fair chunk of time.
And I started becoming aware of my journey and wanting to know more around about the age of 18 to 19. In fact, I had my very first reading when I was 18 years of age.
Yeah, but the same as well.
Yeah, from a Scottish lady by the name of Mrs. Albrighton, who read tea leaves. And she had a very thick accent, and I could barely understand it. But she did my very first reading when I was 18, and it was, and that's what kicked me off into wanting to know more and explore more about what this was, what this gift was, but. Never once, like I said before, Pete, never once did I look upon it as, well, I need to get a grip of this because this is who I am and what I'll be doing. As I said, I didn't really discover this until I was at the age of 49, that, oh, my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing in a full-time sense. And one thing I just want to quickly reiterate here to our beautiful listeners, don't ever think, my friends, don't ever think that you've got to have your life all sorted and planned and knocked over by the age of 30. Because you know what? Your life can open up in so many different ways at so many different stages and ages of your life. And sometimes you've got to live all these sorts of paths and chapters and experiences in your life to bring you to the point of who you truly are and to lead you into what you are supposed to be doing. And as I said, it's been almost 12 years now that it's been my full-time profession. And it's like, oh, wow, this is what I'm here to do. But I didn't discover that until I was 49.
Now, and I think that really leads perfectly into what we'd consider the third really big universal crumb, and that's about divine timing.
Yeah.
I know it's exactly like you said there, the gaps that you had between receiving the book, meeting your mentor, and then kind of living life and finding it and stepping into it full time. I would have to admit I was probably a little bit more excited, and I was probably, because, we're now looking at like the early 2000s. So I was really excited and I really loved this side of myself and I wanted to explore it further. And I remember it was, funnily enough, it was with a reader who was on the Gold Coast 92.5 Gold FM. And I was at my mentor's house that night and it was just the two of us. And we're listening, and the guy named was Jason, and she said, you know what, I'm going to be bloody cheeky. She goes, I haven't had a read. I'm going to call in. I'm calling in my guides. I'm calling in a favour. I'm going to get this reading. Lo and behold, she gets on, and she goes to have the reading with Jason. And I said to her, you haven't had a reading in ages. How about I take you and go see him, have a proper one? And she goes, really? And I said, yeah, I'll drive it because I know you don't drive it. She just broke down in tears. She goes, thank you. And of course, we both went up there. And again, like deja vu, I take someone in for it. She comes out bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done again? But it was interesting. Then I had my turn. And I remember one of these guys, you got any questions? I said, yes. I said, what's going to happen with my spiritual side? What's going to happen with it? When's it going to take off? And I'll never forget, mate, the words floored me to this day. Oh, my jaw just dropped. And this is universe working its magic. Yeah. And it just said, I'm 18 at this time having this reading. And he said, all of this and this side of yourself, it's going to take off when you're 30.
Yeah.
That's 12 years.
That's right.
Mate, that's an eternity for an 18-year-old, you know. But looking back on that, it's divine timing. It has to happen in its own time. I wouldn't be where I am without the experiences that I am.
Of course.
And, absolutely true to his word, literally a month out from my 30th birthday, I opened up my own shop and healing center.
Yeah.
And I really stepped into this and made this my career. And so there's that divine timing aspect. And I think that's the hardest thing to teach. Don't you agree?
Well, it is, because you can't teach somebody how much divine timing is.
Yeah.
What is the divine timing means it's in divine time. That can be, and a lot of people think, I've got to wait for divine time. Now, let's be hypothetical and say, well, divine time in your time frame might be, well, by Christmas next year, this is what I want to do or be or where I want to be at. Divine timing might say, no, it's 5 years, but they might say it's next month. So it's very, very difficult to teach a person what universal time is as in time frames, because, we all have goals and dreams and things we want. You wanted it to happen within 12 months, but the person said it'll be at the age of 30, and you think it's divine time. Now, divine time has no time frame for anyone. It's just that when it's divinely meant to be. And that's why I say to people, one of the greatest things we can learn in this experience, Pete, and in life, not just with our work, is the beautiful art of surrendering. Surrender yourself to the universe. Surrender yourself in the sense of, well, you know what, I'm going to hand it over to the greater power. I'm going to put my energy towards that I so wish and desire to create, to manifest and become, whatever that may be. But I know that divine timing will bring it to me in the most perfect way.
Oh, mate, you have absolutely just sum that up beautifully. And I know that word surrender and surrendering to the divine and surrendering to spirit, it is such an easy thing to say. It is a practice that does require a lot of effort. So, mate, it's been wonderful. I'm Pete Williams.
I'm David Laws.
And I'm going to hand it over to my good mate Dave to take us out because he does it best.
Thank you so much, Pete. Well, for all of our beautiful listeners, just remember, you are exactly where you are meant to be right here and right now. So just take a nice, big, deep, easy breath and we'll see you on the next episode.